Hello and welcome to MalMakes. Today we're doing a painting based on Pikmin 3. This is the full version. If you're interested in the time-lapse, you can click on the card here. Otherwise, let's get started. Over on Steven's channel, Steven Plays, we've been playing through Pikmin 3 Deluxe co-op, so we each control one captain or sometimes two. And I have done some Pikmin paintings, but I've never done anything from the viewpoint of a captain. And I thought that would be really fun to shrink the viewer down and make everything super big around you. And I've taken little photos in photo mode through the game. I've been playing it a little bit in my off time just to do some research for this piece. And I thought it would be really cool to do this low angle where you're super tiny and everything else is very big. But the way Pikmin is things are spread out more than I want them to be for my composition. So what I've done is I've gone into different areas and I was using the photo mode to see exactly what I thought would be fun to paint. And I've taken photos of like the entire area and taken elements out of different parts of that area to combine them into this piece so there's more items to make it even more compact in the small viewpoint you have of the area. So I've basically like put these daisies here because they weren't there. They're a bit further to the left in the actual scene. And I filled in the background area with a lot more foliage so it looks more compact and more densely filled with the greenery. The first thing I need to do is draw everything in roughly so I know where it's going to go. And then I can start to work in my background doing the sky and then all of the rocks and the foliage in the background. There's kind of an entire wall that sits through here, not just the sand gate, but there's like a wall in this area, and then work my way to the foreground. So I need to do all of that first so I know exactly where the sky is going to go. I've roughed everything in with a chalk pastel, even where I want the greenery to be and the sky colors to be for the far off background that I'm doing first. In my sketchbook, I tested a bunch of different blues to see exactly what I liked best with titanium white. Now I could mix this color using my primaries and decide exactly how I want it to be, but I also have tubes of phthalo and Prussian and I wanted to see how they looked with titanium white to see if I could just use one of them. So I tested cyan, ultramarine blue, phthalo blue red shade, Prussian blue, phthalo blue green shade, and Payne's gray. And I really like how phthalo blue green shade looks. I think it has the deepest blue that really fits with a super saturated Pikmin 3. And I started to do a little bit of that sky here. So wherever I've left these big spaces there and then over here in the corner, I'm going to fill that in with titanium white and a little bit of that phthalo blue green shade. I've been trying to create this bokeh effect, which is how the actual game has the faraway backgrounds. And I started by putting paint on the canvas, just trying to get an idea of where my colors were, where the blues were, white, green, all of the different colors. And then once I started to get into the darker colors for the tree parts, I started with the darks and just blended everything together so I had these areas of light and dark for the trees. And then I started to do the actual bokeh part. I was using little circles with a paintbrush, varying up the sizes, so some are a little bit bigger and some are a little bit smaller. And I worked through some of the colors I had from the darker greens, working my way lighter and lighter and lighter greens, bringing some of those light colors into the dark areas, and then I worked all the way until I got to titanium white, just kept adding white to my greens until they were super light. Then I started to add some blues in to bring in the sky, and now I'm working back towards titanium white to fill in the rest of the sky. So this area over here doesn't have any titanium white in the sky. This is a very, very light blue. But once it all dries, I'm going to add just pure titanium white on top of it just to bring in some of the highlights and fill in some areas like here where I don't feel it's quite right. The other thing I think I might do is take some of these colors, like some of these greens, and bring them a little bit further into these darker areas, just because I think it's too dark for that far away background. After finishing the background with the bokeh, I started to block in everything else. I wanted to make sure that I knew where things were going and I could start to refine the shapes and the value and the texture after I had it on the canvas. So even though I'm not actually sure how tall this gate is going to be compared to everything else, I still blocked it in with some Titan buff just to show me where it's going, and then I could make small refinements to show myself, oh well, it needs to actually be a little bit right there for perspective. After I did that, I started to take my chalk pastel and drew in the planes of all of the rocks to show myself where the light is going to hit, where it needs to be lighter and darker, and where it's going to shift from fully in light into a mid shadow and then into the dark shadow of the far side. But with all of that done, I can start to work on those things. Now I'm working on everything in the background that's like behind this wall that's not gray. So all of the browns and the greens that are going to be in this area back here. After I finish those, I'm going to do the same thing but for the gray rocks, and then work on this very mid wall here, just making sure everything is refined with texture and color and value before I start to move on to the next layer in the painting. I've been working in the mid background layer. From here forward, everything's just blocked in plain colors, but these rocks and these hills in here are done. I'm just adding foliage. Lots of different types of foliage. There's a spike plant back here that has like long grass-like leaves. There's some oak leaves that sit in the far off background, and I've chosen to do those a bit more like light green-blue colors because I need them to stand out from the background. If I go too green, it'll get confusing with my background, so they have to be a different green. This leaf isn't quite done. I just started to block it in and started to give it some texture and value, but I think I need to push it a little bit more because some of it is getting lost with my bokeh background. I want to do more of these leaves as a barrier between where the rest of the foliage is going to go, because that way the rest of the foliage won't get confused with the bokeh background. So they're there to separate them, kind of like priming a wall white before you put another color down. It's a visual barrier so your eye doesn't get confused at what it's looking at. I finished off my mid-ground foliage, everything above the division or behind the division that is the gate, the rock, and this hill. I wanted to put a philodendron leaf over here, the whole vine for it, but it started to cover up the parts I liked that I had done over here, so I shrank it down into a little cluster of heart-shaped leaves and added some grass over here to fill in that area, also echoing the grass I have right here. Now that all of that foliage is done, I can continue working on the division. This part is done already, and I'm working on the gate next. Getting this regular wave across the top of the part that gets broken down has been a little frustrating, but not as frustrating as the side supports. Those aren't just blocks, they curve in towards the top and they're cubed, so there's like 4 points that are up there on the very top of them. They're a very strange shape, so I've drawn them. I don't know how I feel about them yet, but I'm going to paint in the part that gets broken down here. That way I'll work on that and focus on something else, and I can try coming back to those later. I'm using the same technique on the towers as I used on the gate, working my way from my darkest burnt umber all the way into Titan buff for the face where it should be as light as pretty much the rest of the gate. The left side is going to stay a little bit dark, and I can keep working some lighter colors in there if I want to, but I'm working now on the faces, trying to get them a lot lighter. After lots of colors and lots of layers and lots of tapping with this big brush, I finally have the ground looking right. I like how it looks. It matches the color scheme of the rest of the painting and doesn't feel out of place. I drew in the daisy plant, the same one that I have here, just bigger and more of it, and I drew in the bulb orb, and I thought it looked too empty, especially down in this corner. It was just really empty because everything else has so much detail to look at, and I thought it looked really strange. So I moved the bulb orb a little bit, I repositioned him a few times, I drew in more of the daisies down here, and I like how that looked, but it still felt empty. So I brought down more of the grass like I have up here and then back here. And now that I have all of this grass in the painting, it reminds me of the grass the Pikmin pluck in the first few games. In the third game they have the little eggs with the nectar, but in the first few you have the grass that they pluck up and then the nectar appears. So I thought that was kind of a fun inclusion that would bring that all together. With all of this blocked in with white for the bulb orb because it'll be too dark to use black with the red and white, I'm going to start painting all of this and filling it in. I'm starting with the grass because it sits behind the daisy plant here, so I'll finish both of those at the same time. Then I'll work on the daisy plants, and in between letting the layers of that dry, I'll work on the bulb orb, filling it in red first to let it sit, maybe doing a layer or 2 or 3 depending on how opaque it is, and then starting to fill in the dots. I am going to draw his chicken feet in because I think it would look more like a mushroom otherwise, and I don't want him to look totally like a mushroom. And then I just have to add shadows and everything will be done. There's not much left to paint. The petals I already blocked in titanium white, but they don't have the Payne gray shadow that these two do, and Payne's gray is just a blue-black. It's very, very dark, but mixed with titanium white, it makes like a light blue-gray color, and it looks really nice for this. It also looks kind of like the rock colors, so it will bring that to the rest of the piece. The bulb orb needs feet, and his spots need shaded yet, and the center of this flower needs to be filled in, and I'm going to be using the gate colors just to tie it to the rest of the piece and not look awkward like orange where there is no orange on the rest of the piece. So it will tie it all together. And then I just have to look everything over and decide if I'm done with it. I've painted the center of this flower a few different colors. I started with some of the same colors as the gate and I didn't like how it looked, and then I decided to paint it green because when the flower petals fall off these, what's left is greenish yellow, and I thought that looked alright. I wanted to hide it because it was just bringing too much attention to itself, and I still didn't like it. So once I finished painting the bulb orb, I took the same colors from the feet with a little bit more brown and painted it those colors, and I like how it looks finally. But because that's very yellow, I think it would be really nice to turn this Pikmin into a yellow Pikmin. Originally I wanted it to be red because the bulb orb was red, and I was going to put the flower on the top instead of a leaf, but I think the leaf would blend in better, and I think yellow will look better over here and blend in just a little bit better than red would, which is going to stand out a lot on the green. For the bulb orb, I had done the feet with some of the oranges and I really liked how they looked. And for these dots, they've been kind of frustrating to work on. I started by painting white dots to make sure I had the placement and everything right, and I liked how it looked. And then I outlined on top of it with alizarin crimson, which is a dark red, to give it a little bit of a ring around the edge on the red part. Then I repainted them white, and then I put a shadow on the inside of the dot, which is the dark gray on the inside of the circle here. And they still looked a little cartoon-like, and I took some lighter gray than what I had done there and just darkened each of the circles on the bottom left side because I have all the light over here. And that really helped bring the entire piece together, and the bulb orb turned out really nice. The very last thing I have to do, of course, is just finish this little Pikmin over here, which I already said is going to be yellow with a leaf top. And we're done! We have a scene from Pikmin 3. If you're interested in this piece, you could buy a poster or a phone case, or bid on this original canvas. There's links down below. Also, consider supporting me on Patreon. You can find out more at supportmal.com. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes of MalMakes, and I'll see you again here for another video game painting.